for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. One hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
2100 hours Central African time. A very good evening to you. Entering Africa World Hour with the smooth, soothing sounds of Jonathan Butler with Miriam Makeba's Pata Pata. Isn't that a wonderful way to start Monday? Hope yours isn't hectic as yet. If not, we will try and ease you into it. But of course, when it comes to news and current affairs, it's not always easy or smooth. But we do bring you up to speed on what is happening in and around your world, whether you are listening, watching from the heart of the continent or from other parts of the globe. Welcome to it as we give you the views, the news, the voices and the perspectives that matter. This is Africa World Hour. I am Tsepiso Makwetla and you are listening to Channel Africa, the African perspective. Let's take you straight to our top stories this hour.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let me start with this. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases inquiry in South Africa has heard a scathing attack on its former president, Thabo Mbeki Lukhanya Qalata, son of Fort Qalata, who was murdered by the apartheid state in 1985, has laid the blame for the denial of justice squarely at Mbeki's feet.
Now he issues a statement and he says the NPA must demonstrate enough integrity by apologizing for not processing the TRC cases rather than engage in dishonorable behavior of trying to hide behind a fig leaf with nothing more than pure fabrication. Here, former President Thabo Mbeki insults our intelligence. He says the NPA, they must demonstrate enough integrity. What about integrity on his half? How about him apologizing to us for the failures of his administrations to process TRC cases? He says the NPA is engaging in dishonorable behavior. I suppose his behavior was quite honorable. Yet here I sit without justice for my father.
In other news, Kenya's former President Uhuru Kenyatta says a new Angola-mediated ceasefire with the M23 group will start tomorrow. The agreement is intended to bring an immediate halt to hostilities in the east, where communities have borne the brunt of recurring clashes. Kenyatta has indicated that mediation efforts are beginning to take shape and that discussions among the parties have been constructive.
We are making good headway. The team is working well. We're looking forward to future meetings where we hope to consolidate positions and begin the actual work on the ground to see that the people of DRC get the peace and stability that they deserve.
Four international aid agencies have joined forces to strengthen the protection of children in Somalia. Head of Protection, Gender and Inclusion for Save the Children in Somalia, Zara Dahir, says Save the Children, World Vision, Plan International and SOS Children's Villages have come together to combat violence against the most vulnerable in the region.
We know that early marriage and child forced early marriage, as well as FGM, is quite prominent within Somalia. So these are challenges really unique to Somalia that we try to combat. When we talk about the violence against children, it comes in various different forms, both within the environment as well as from the community, from the household, from negative social norms and practices that have been embedded within Somali culture for many years. So really trying to combat all of these things. We know that within times of conflict and displacement, children's education is disturbed. They're more prone to health risks. And all of these mean that children are really at risks of exploitation, abuse and neglect.
And finally, the Chinese tech company ByteDance has announced plans to curb an artificial intelligence video tool after Disney and other entertainment giants threatened legal action. Last week, AI-generated videos using the company's C-Dance app went viral, with many clips based on real actors and films, including copyrighted characters from the Marvel franchise and Star Wars. The BBC's Nick Marsh has more details.
Big Hollywood players, so we're talking Disney, Paramount, Skydance, the Motion Picture Association, they're all saying that ByteDance is infringing their intellectual property, stealing it, essentially. Disney called it a smash and grab, and they've been sending ByteDance all kinds of cease and desist letters threatening legal action. We reached out to ByteDance, who are actually they're headquartered here in Singapore. They told us that the company respects intellectual property rights and it's taking steps to strengthen safeguards to prevent the unauthorized use of intellectual property. But the big question of how it's actually training its models is still unanswered.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is now 6 minutes past 9. Let's tell you about this. A group of armed men have gunned down at least 30 people and burned houses and shops in a number of villages in Nigeria's Niger State. The attacks are the latest in a surge blamed on violent bandits who have carried out deadly assaults, abductions for ransom, and displaced communities across northern Nigeria. For more on what is happening in the Borgu local government area, we are joined now by a journalist in Nigeria, and that is Adosua, to find out from him exactly what is happening. Adosua Giwa Osagi. Adosua, can you just give us the latest on the attacks?
Good evening. Thank you for having me on. Now, what we saw on the 14th to the 15th of February in the Borgu local government area of Niger State is a coordinated attack in 3 different villages where at least 26 to 32 people have been killed. Now, Borgu local government area is part of the Borgu Emirate. It actually used to be a part of Kwara State until 1991 and is now a part of Niger State. It also features the Borgu Game Reserve, which is part of the Kainji National Forest. Now, the Kainji National Park, which has been used as a base for terrorist groups to launch their attacks on different communities, both in Niger State and in Kwara State.
And just if we could get a sense of how many villages were hit, and as you mentioned that it's part of the Borgu local government, but you mentioned that it used to be part of Kwara, and Kwara has been where we've seen a slew of attacks as well.
Yes, so to help understand the picture better, Borgu Game Reserve is part of Kainji National Park. That park stretches through both Kwara and Niger states. There are basically 3 key forests to think about when it comes to terrorism in Nigeria. So although we do have borders in terms of one is Kwara State or one is Niger State, this park and these forests spread through both states. And terrorist organizations, even some foreign organizations like Lakurawa, have gone into these parks and used the forest as a safe haven. As of 2021, the Controller General of our national parks said at least 1,000 acres or hectares of land was being used by terrorists as enclaves. So to understand what is going on in Borgu local government area of Niger State, it's also to understand what's going on in Kwara State, because these attacks are essentially being launched from the same base, which is the Kainji National Park.
Able to tell us about the death toll at this point, and if there are any reliable figures as to how many people have been injured, abducted, and who they are, etc.?
So there are the figures right now say about 26 to 32 people have been abducted. We're getting different, have been killed rather. We're getting different figures on who has been killed and who has been abducted. To understand also that this is not the first attack on Borgu local government area this year. There have been multiple attacks on this local government area, as well as attacks on security outposts within the area. There are also different types of kidnappings and abductions. You do have abductions for ransom, but you also have these terrorists abducting women to force them into marriages. So right now it's unclear who has been abducted for ransom, who has been abducted for marriage, and how many they are, as authorities seem to be trying to keep these numbers close to their chests. But the numbers we're hearing right now is that 26 to 32 people have been killed over the weekend.
And as you said, the profile of those responsible could vary, whether it's outright violence or it's jihadist groups or, as you say, it's banditry. Has anybody claimed responsibility for this attack?
So far, no one has claimed responsibility, but we must understand that even when we use the word banditry, what we are really describing is organized terrorism. Again, these attacks are coordinated. They're from similar groups who work within, networks, whether there's Al Qaeda, funded Boko Haram, or ISIS, or funded ISWAP, or aligned rather than funded. These groups or Lakurawa, which came to Nigeria through Nigeria's border with Niger and Sokoto State and formed bases in the Kainji National Park. These are different groups and they don't always claim responsibility, particularly if they're not the bigger recognized terror organizations, but they do operate in a similar way across board.
Now, I understand, according to reports, that community members in these villages have complained about lack of security force visibility. Is this the case? And what of the reports suggesting that American help is in the offing? The United States has offered to assist the Nigerian state with this type of activity. Has that, actually happened?
Well, American troops have arrived in Nigeria already. We are being told that they will not be taking part in active combat, but rather will be providing the Nigerian troops with training and intelligence assistance. In terms of security support in Borgu local government area, on the 3rd of January, there was an attack there that killed 30 people. The next day, there was also an attack on a police or security outpost there. We are now seeing attacks again, of course, just this weekend. And so in terms of security, yes, security in that area is definitely a huge issue. And it's a huge issue across, the region. It's an under-policed and under-secured area. It's also very odd because I don't know if you know this, but the president of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, is known as Jagaban. He's actually the Jagaban of the Borgu Emirate. He's supposed to be the head of the warriors. It's a traditional title. So I do think there is some extra significance here that Borgu keeps getting hit. The president is the Jagaban of Borgu.
What does that mean? Because it's a very interesting fact to, highlight. Would that be almost a taunt of his lack of capacity, not only as head of state, but the fact that he has ramped up deployment of security forces across Nigeria to deal with the insecurity? And also, more importantly, is there a greater plan to deal with the displacement, the trauma, the social and food insecurity as a result of these attacks?
Well, one would hope there is a greater plan, but right now we're not necessarily seeing results. What we've been seeing is piecemeal activity in terms of trying to secure the nation. And very importantly, you mentioned food security, because not only are farmers being chased from their farms, but these terrorists are causing lasting ecological damage to our national reserves and our national parks. When it comes to taunting, if there is some symbolic significance to the fact that the president is the Jagaban of Borgu, I do think that is a part of it. But we have seen some arrests made and some trials. In 2024, there was a trial actually of a terrorist, over 100 terrorists gotten from the Kainji National Park. So we've seen some of these trials and some of these arrests, but it doesn't seem to have made a dent. And rather, I think since the Christmas Day bombings that were by the United States, it does seem that there has been an escalation in Nigeria of these terrorist and banditry attacks.
Well, we do thank you so much for your time and the latest update on what is happening in the Borgu local government district. That is in Nigeria, north of Nigeria, villages near Niger State, where there has been another spate of attacks on villages with people being killed and others being abducted. Adesua Giwa Osagi is a journalist out there in Nigeria, bringing us the latest on that.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has informed UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that South Africa will withdraw its troop contribution to MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, after 27 years of involvement. Defense expert Dean Wingren, what are the main security implications of South Africa withdrawing troops from MONUSCO, and why now?
South Africa has been part of the MONUSCO mission since it was established in 1999, and is South Africa's longest-running peacekeeping and peace enforcement mission. So it's not something to be taken lightly when the President says that he's unilaterally withdrawing from the mission. Why now is the question? Well, the MONUSCO mission has always been intended to be terminated initially at the end of 2025, and then it was extended to the end of this year. So with the funding crisis within the UN generally, there's less funds for these peacekeeping missions, and hence the UN has had to cut back on the various contributing countries and equipment.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. 1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
17 minutes past 9, we continue with the Monday edition of Africa World Hour, looking back at the weekend where the 39th African Union Leaders Summit renewed its commitment to peace and security across the continent. The heads of states gathered in the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa over the weekend, where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for Africa to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. As Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe reports, AU Commission Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf says this year's discussion centered on strategic priorities.
Held under the theme Assuring Sustainable Water Availability and Safe Sanitation Systems to Achieve the Goal of Agenda 2063, leaders came together in pursuit of a healthier and more prosperous Africa, aiming to bring hope and opportunity to millions of citizens. The African Union identified sustainable water and sanitation systems as a key priority for 2026, viewing this as a crucial step toward achieving the healthy aspirations of Agenda 2063. However, attention was also extended to a range of other issues as outlined by AU Commission Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf.
We tried to focus our attention on strategic issues. Most of the deliberations and discussions took place in this hall with regard to peace and security on the continent, the reforms that we are trying to put in place for this organization, and at the end also the participation of the African Union to the G20. Of course, we received the reports of the assembly committees, which are presided over by heads of state. Agenda 2063 was one of them, the reports, or the NEPAD report, AFCFTA report, and so on and so forth, and in particular also a report on the UN Security Council reforms and the demands of the African Union to have these 2 permanent seats with the right of veto and 5 non-permanent seats.
The 4-day summit also hosted nearly 15 side events, including a new business forum aiming at mobilizing private sector support to help finance the continent's development programs.
And as side events, there were almost 15 side events that have been organized during these 4 days of the 39 session of the summit. We had a forum of the business community. That was also something new. Given the fact that the financing of our development programs are becoming more and more challenging, it has been advised that we embark on a journey with our business community so that they also become a contributor to our development programs. And we had a forum as a side event in this building.
Ali Yusuf said African leaders have reaffirmed a zero-tolerance stance on unconstitutional changes of government while strengthening commitments to peace, stability, and the AU's Silencing the Guns initiative. He says lasting peace remains essential for continental development and deeper regional integration.
So the conference actually pinpointed the fact that the heads of state will have zero tolerance for inconstitutional or unconstitutional change of governments on our continent. The conference also underscored its determination to silence the guns. This is also a very important program if we contemplate to develop this continent and create the integration conditions for our countries. We need to silence the guns. We need peace on this continent. We need stability on this continent. And we have a program for that. And the conference really underscored the necessity and its determination to pursue the goal of silencing the guns.
The AU has also recognized colonization as a crime against humanity and reiterated solidarity with the Palestinian people, reaffirming support for Palestinian statehood amid ongoing tensions in Gaza and the West Bank.
It's very important also, one last point, that the conference recognized, colonization as a crime against humanity. That's very important. And the conference expressed its solidarity with Palestine and the Palestinian people and invited the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority to come and deliver his speech here. This is a tradition in this building. This is not the first time, but given the circumstances now, what is going on in Gaza and the West Bank, I think it had a more, let's say, symbolic importance than anything else, but the African Union member countries support the rights of the people of Palestine to become independent and have their own statehood.
Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama, who is AU champion on reparations, says efforts are underway to advance reparatory justice, with Ghana leading a diplomatic push at the United Nations to recognize slavery and the transatlantic slave trade as crimes against humanity. He said a high-level committee has been established to coordinate consultations and prepare a draft resolution in line with international law.
At the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025, I announced that Ghana would lead the effort to table a resolution declaring slavery and the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. That commitment marked the beginning of a structured diplomatic and legal process. I directed the Minister of Foreign Affairs to establish a high-level committee to coordinate consultations, refine the legal framework, and prepare a draft text consistent with international law and diplomatic practice.
He said progress has been made on the reparations initiative, anchored in international law and guided by historical accuracy, legal defensibility, and continental alignment.
Today, I'm pleased to report significant progress. The initiative is firmly grounded in international law. Slavery is prohibited under international law as a peremptory norm, a jus cogens principle from which no derogation is permitted. The resolution builds upon this legal foundation and rests on three pillars. First is historical accuracy, second is legal defensibility, and third is continental and diaspora alignment.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And we continue now with this. We look at those renewed calls from the summit for Africa to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, and the commitments made on slavery and reparations. We're joined now by Head of Media Relations at Africa Prosperity Network, Wilberforce Sasare. He joins us from Accra, Ghana. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm just going to springboard the conversation on what President Mahama said on taking the issue of slavery, modern or historical, and the issue of reparations to the United Nations. Just if you could just give us the salient points of the commitments made around that.
All right, so this issue of reparations actually predates President Mahama. And that's because it is his predecessor, President Akufo-Addo, who started the conversation. And so he has decided to continue to champion it because of its importance. Now, I envisage that the president's agenda really is to ensure that this issue of reparation is adopted at the highest level. If it is adopted at the highest level, then the countries who are said to have perpetrated this heinous crime against humanity in the African continent will be made to commit to doing specific things on the continent that will act as legacy projects and legacy activities on the continent to be some form of a payback. And so reparations are not necessarily handing over monies into the hands of ordinary people, but ensuring that the continent can get the West, which is those who perpetrated this crime, to do some significant projects in the African continent to serve as a reminder of what the continent got out of that heinous crime that was committed against it. So, for example, can you imagine if there is a train line from South Africa, where you are, all the way to Egypt on the top of Africa, or there is a railway line all the way from, the western part of Africa, let's say Liberia, through Ghana, all the way to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where we just returned from. So that's the whole idea of this issue about reparations.
And really what it is also is about global, economic reform, because this theme was part of the AU's overall theme for last year, and I'm curious to see if there were any concrete benchmarks that were set by the leaders that said this would determine progress on this theme. So it wasn't just about President Nana Akufo-Addo, it was the main anchor of last year's AU calendar for the year.
Yes, indeed, it was. And that is because the entire African continent recognizes that the issue of reparation is not a one country issue, it is a whole African continental issue. And so they do recognize that, and that is the reason why the entire continent has bought into the idea. And we in Ghana are excited that the current president has decided to take it on and continue to champion it. But you talked about economic reforms, and that is essential because all over the world, there is a call for all kinds of reforms. One of the reforms that is being called for is economic reforms, and that is because currently, if you look at the economic circumstances of the world, it would appear that the African continent is always disadvantaged in terms of what it can receive from the international market as against what the other part of the world is receiving. And so the African continent is essentially economically disadvantaged. And that is the reason why there are these calls for economic reforms, just as much as they are calling for other reforms that we probably will be talking about, for example, the UN Security Council reforms.
And that's what I want to get into, because the reform is not just economics, financial, it is about global power reform. You've heard what the UN Secretary General has said, and Africa has long endorsed the Ezulwini Consensus, which calls for 2 permanent seats with veto carrying powers on the UN Security Council. It's what Africa has been calling for such a long time, but it just seems to be something that is being paid lip service to. How is Africa going to push for this to eventually happen, to become a reality?
So this is a very intelligent question, and I'll start answering the question this way. Currently, the UN security structure is such that it has 15 members. 5 of those members are permanent members: China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, and United States. The remaining 10 are elected to serve 2-year terms. And so, for example, currently the 10, we have 2 African countries, Somalia and Liberia are the 2 African countries who are there. Liberia has up to 2027, I should say, and Somalia has up to 2026. The rest are Panama, Pakistan. You have also Latvia, Greece, Denmark, Democratic Republic of Congo. So I made a mistake. There are 3 African countries there, and then Colombia and also Bahrain. But the reason why I decided to give this background is that this structure of the UN Security Council is you can say the post-World War II structure. And the 5 permanent members are enjoying it because of the veto powers they have. And so far, it is their veto powers that has taking the world the direction that it is in right now. Because anything that the United States supports, China and Russia would not support it, even if the UK and France supports the US. And anything that China and Russia supports, the US, France, and the United Kingdom will automatically not support it. And so there hasn't been much progress. And that is the reason why people are calling for reforms. They're saying that in the 21st century, we cannot be operating the most important or one of the most important bodies in the world, which is the UN Security Council, the way it was structured before or after the Second World War. We have moved on so many years such that there's a need for reforms. And the reforms that are being asked is to change the permanent membership structure, and beyond that, also admit other people from different parts of the world. So if you look at the 5 permanent members, China is in Asia, Russia on top of China, also in the East, and then you talk about the United Kingdom, France, and the United States predominantly in the West. Okay. So 2 Eastern countries, 3 Western countries. And they are saying that, so what about the rest of the world? What about Africa? What about the other parts of the world, the Americas, and all that kind of stuff? And so there's the call for the reform, and it's a reform that globally should be supported.
Wilberforce, thank you very much for your time. That is Wilberforce Asare, who is the head of media relations at Africa Prosperity Network, speaking to us about the just concluded AU Heads of States and Governments weekend meeting. Brings the time to 29 minutes to 10.
Channel Africa is moving with the times, and so is our WhatsApp line. We've changed our WhatsApp number, making it even easier for you to stay connected. Send us your voice notes, comments, shout outs, and song requests to our new WhatsApp number, +27 83 288 6684. That's +27 83 288 6684. Save it, share it, and stay in the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has informed UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that South Africa will withdraw its troop contribution to MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, after nearly 27 years of involvement. Defense expert Dean Wingren, what are the main security implications of South Africa withdrawing troops from MONUSCO, and why now?
South Africa has been part of the MONUSCO mission since it was established in 1999, and is South Africa's longest running peacekeeping and peace enforcement mission. So it's not something to be taken lightly when the President says that he's unilaterally withdrawing from the mission. Why now is the question. Well, the MONUSCO mission has always been intended to be terminated initially at the end of 2025, and then it was extended to the end of this year. So with the funding crisis within the UN generally, there's less funds for these peacekeeping missions, and hence the UN has had to cut back on the various contributing countries and equipment.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. 1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
27 minutes to 10. This is Africa World Hour. Welcome to it if you've just joined us, and I am indeed Tsepiso Makwetla. Thank you so much for joining us. As Africa navigates rapid development, climate change and global uncertainty, the African World Heritage Fund says it will continue its 20-year legacy of ensuring that the continent's irreplaceable heritage is protected for future generations. Founded in the year 2006 by UNESCO and the African Union, the fund aims to address the historic challenges of the underrepresentation of African sites on the World Heritage List and the limited capacity to safeguard Africa's outstanding universal value heritage. To speak about this, we're joined on the line by African World Heritage Fund Executive Director, Dr. Albino Japela. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening to you and to your listeners, and thank you for the invitation.
I just want to get straight to the kind of work that you've done that you believe is helping support African World Heritage over the past 2 weeks. And we know a big part of the disservice, really, I'm trying to find the word. I don't know why I'm losing my train of thought here, but the injustice for African World Heritage endeavors has been extractive economies. I mean, tourism, for instance, has focused a lot on these sites, but the benefit to African countries is very little. So how is the model changing to ensure that it does benefit Africans as a whole?
Thanks. And as you rightly put, the great sense of injustice, not only in terms of how Africa is perceived, but also how we see our continent ourselves. So indeed, Africa is known for being the cradle of humankind because of this richness, not only in terms of history, culture, but also is also known for being the biodiversity hotspot for the globe. But despite that richness, if you look at how Africa is represented on the prestigious World Heritage List under the 1972 Convention, which focused on the protection of both cultural and national heritage of outstanding universal value, Africa only accounts for 12% of a list of over 1,200 sites. On the other hand, we find that also the continent has a high percentage of sites that are on the list of World Heritage in danger because of its critical state. So the African World Heritage Fund was created exactly to address those key challenges. On one hand, to ensure that we support African member states, communities, civil society to basically represent this rich and diverse heritage of Africa on that global stage and redress the idea that it's a continent that is not properly represented on this global register, but also strengthen the capacities of heritage practitioners and community members who live and within and around these World Heritage sites, not only to improve the safeguarding of the sites, but also to see how the sites contribute directly to improve the livelihoods of those very same communities. So over the past, yes.
Apologies for jumping in there. I just want to obviously get as much from you as possible. So I am just thinking the partnerships that the fund is seeking obviously then have to be strategic. So when we're looking at local capacity that empowers African experts and obviously communities against the imperatives that we're now contending with, there's the issue of climate justice because of what we're facing in terms of the challenges, but there's also the issue of cultural preservation that is untainted by Western ideologies. What are the challenges you're facing? What is your strategic thinking in terms of the partnerships? Just share with that.
So the African World Heritage Fund basically work with a wide range of partners. So not only from African governments, but also we are a Category 2 center under the auspices of UNESCO with a specific mandate to advance the goals and the mission of UNESCO when it comes to heritage. But we are also fit within the mandate of the Africa Union. So, for instance, in terms of how we look at heritage, if you consider as a matter of example, in the background, we have the Maluti-Drakensberg Mountains, which stand between South Africa and Lesotho. And if you look at it, you're looking at a landscape that is both a natural site in terms of being a hotspot for biodiversity conservation, endemic species, but also you're looking at the cultural side, the highest concentration of rock art paintings, which is basically the legacy of the San communities for over 4,000 years ago. So it is, and it also has, this year we celebrate under the Africa Union, the theme of water and sanitation in Africa. This is one of the sources, if not the greatest sources of water in Southern Africa. So it is this preservation that we bring a range of partners together to basically make a case for heritage, not only as an accessory for our development agendas as the continent, but also as a main lever to not only change the image of the continent, but also to anchor our very own development, which is a development that is basically based on African values and knowledge.
So how is the fund balancing the protection of tangible structural heritage with the preservation of intangible living heritage? And even that word intangible, I've always found fascinating because there's a lot of debate around that.
Yes, one of the great works of the fund is, in essence, to advocate for a notion of heritage that is basically entangled. So there is only one. So there is no tangible that is divorced or separated from the intangible. So the same as if you look at any landscape. So a sacred shelter in the landscape behind me, it is a place, is it a physical place with rock images, but it also has a wide range of associated values for the living communities. So often the dichotomy that we find in which is basically conventional in other regions, which is coming more from the Western way of thinking, it is basically what it does not apply. And one of the great works that we are able to do is to take this very own African perspective of what heritage means for the local communities and custodians, and to basically take this very same notion to the global stage.
Dr. Chipela, I suspect you and I are going to have many conversations around this. It is a passion of mine, so I do appreciate you speaking to us and sharing with us, Dr. Albina Chipela, and we look forward to more education from the African World Heritage Fund. He is the Executive Director. Brings the time to 18 minutes to 10.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
South African court has postponed the murder and robbery case against a woman and 2 men arrested in connection with the murder of Isaac David Sattler, 22-year-old e-hailing driver. The trio were apprehended after a video of the recent murder went viral on social media platforms, with the case bringing into sharp focus the benefits and pitfalls of social media as a crime-fighting tool. We look at how law enforcement agencies are increasingly using such videos to nab criminals. And to speak about this is South African social activist Dumisolo. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening to the viewers, and thank you for having me.
So what are your thoughts around this, the use of social media to assist the police, or is social media pretty much doing the work of police?
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to send condolences to David's family. What we saw on the video was very traumatic, and I can't imagine what they're going through. So I'd like to send my sincerest condolences, and we hope that justice prevails. And secondly, thank you to law enforcement for acting swiftly following us and everyone on social media, unfortunately, sharing that video, which then subsequently led to the suspects being arrested. And lastly, to answer your question, it was, in my view, through social media and the pressure that ultimately led to the cops acting with the speed in which they did.
And therein lies the rub, Dumi, the pressure that galvanizes police to do their work. South Africans in general are frustrated with the pace, the efficacy of law enforcement on such cases. And the rapid circulation of dashcam footage on social media, one would imagine, is a tool that the police should have ready on hand for these investigations, for them to make quick arrests. Why is it taking social media activists to galvanize police, to your mind?
It's very unfortunate, and I totally agree with you that these are things that ought to be there. More importantly, our streets, given the level of crimes in this country, ought to have these cameras that such data can easily be accessible. If you drive around, for example, suburbs or all over, you'll see these cams all over. But whether those are effective in terms of catching perpetrators is something yet to be seen. And I think it's quite an injustice that it is when an injustice happens, people have to now resort to social media and get it on the trends map for there to be action. I think people are generally tired, given the inaction most of the time that we see from law enforcement. Sometimes there's no update post a case, but when these things come onto social media, we are able to monitor and constantly refer to various posts where we then seek that there be updates, and you will often see that these things are, expedited, be it in courts or through arrest or otherwise. But I do agree with your point that ordinarily such things should be available, and with the amount of money and budgets that are allocated, such resources should be there. We should also be having police officers with dash cams, body cams, on them, including JMPD, so that we can see effective implementation of policing as well.
Obviously, there was a good outcome out of this. We saw the female culprit hand herself over after the video went viral. But the question is there a line between using viral content for justice while respecting the legal protocols of evidence handling? So it's for a good cause. The outcome is positive, but it obviously does overstep some protocols.
Absolutely. But I think for me, and often there's an overrider here, and that is in the interest of justice. Given the seriousness of the offense, for example, they have to then show why they should be released on bail. We now know, as a matter of fact, that all four of them have now been captured, and two handed themselves over, and they then abandoned their bail application. But I do think that there's value in social media and the overrider being in the interest of justice, which would often be seen as the swift action, sharing within the parameters, and ultimately ensuring that perpetrators are put and brought to book. But I do want to add one qualifier. There's the trend where, and it's unfortunate, and again, it's another evil, where you are able to take what you see on a dash cam, you put it onto AI or an AI tool, and it generates an image. That's quite dangerous because you would sometimes have a wrong picture or image that's generated, and it could get people to either be arrested or for vigilantism to occur, and it's something that ought to be guarded against, and we don't want that. But people are desperate. As I said, they are tired of the levels of crime, and social media has now suddenly become, or has been, a tool for reaching a wider reach, but putting pressure, on law enforcement to do its job.
And there are people who are just mischievous, who, as you say, could use AI to generate content that is, for deep fake purposes, and actually point a finger at somebody who is completely blameless of whatever. So in that case, how do we teach people to use this responsibly, this tool, this crime fighting tool, responsibly, and protect the identities of people?
Yeah, I think there's a greater need for awareness, right? So education on what can social media do, what can it achieve, and ultimately some of the limitations. Again, given the serious crime threats and trends in South Africa, people really often come to social media because they don't know what to do. You would walk into a police station, you would not be attended to on time, for example. Some people are still waiting for cases. Some of those cases are not allocated an investigator or otherwise. So there's the discomfort and disheartening associated with the speedy resolution of offenses, especially cases of GBV, for example. However, the element of awareness and teaching is something that ought to be continuous. And I think law enforcement, including our government, ought to embark on an initiative. We had something similar with Soul City, HIV, and stuff. Given the advent of social media, there ought to be a dedicated sort of an awareness raising on the dangers of social media, and how to use it effectively, and how can it effectively be used as a crime combating tool without risking innocent people being harmed as a result of images that are incorrect or falsely generated.
Tsepiso, thank you very much for your time, your insights, speaking to us about the role of social media in catching criminals and exposing criminals. Social media activist Tsepiso speaking to us. It brings the time to 9 minutes to 10, and let's take a sneak preview at what to expect from African Diaries. Buleng in the studio with us, brightening up the studio. Hello.
You are just as bright. I love your glasses.
Hey, wait a king. The story of these glasses re-emerging, it really needs its own episode.
And I want to hear all about it.
You know what? Have a conversation about, and this is real talk.
Yeah.
What women go through, whether it's perimenopause, menopause, brain fog.
No kidding.
There's a lot. There's a lot. And what we contend with is a lot.
As long as you look good.
While doing it, no?
Yes. And I mean, besides orange and green. Always. So bright recognizes bright.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
The African sun said that golden globe, orange globe falling against the background. So, all right, tell me what's coming up.
You and I have got this connection that goes a long way. You know what I'm saying? So when I see orange, I'm like, yeah, that's my girl. Besides, you have your signature Tsepiso glasses, which I'm always going to commend you about. So keep those going, because honestly, they really fit your face. And a pop of color can never go wrong.
Never.
Never. No matter what day of the week it is, like on a Monday, we are bright and lovely.
All right, Hans. So tell us what's coming up.
Before I do that, do you like my African Diaries voice? Is it giving?
It is, but it's taken from my next interview.
So okay, let me go. Okay, cool. We're going to start by looking at precaution. So what women can do preconception if you're looking to have a child, what you need to do to take care of your health, and how to help you in that process. And then Paul Detroit is going to come through in the last hour of African Diaries to talk about the book, The Power of Persuasion. And we're looking at the last chapter, which is all about how to take all of that theory into action, looking at, not being manipulative, but how to take, how to understand people and use what people are expecting from you to your benefit without being misunderstood or feeling like you're taking away or you're being selfish,
Healthy boundaries.
Love that.
All right. Thanks, Buleng. Looking forward to that. That's African Diaries coming up in just a moment.
Channel Africa 1060. 6 decades of stories, voices, and vision. 1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And just wrapping up the program, South African Facilities Management Company Serviced has partnered with FCG Bird Control to provide ethical pest control solutions against pigeons, starlings and sparrows. To tell us more about it, Managing Executive of Service Hygiene Solutions, Dion Verstaden, joins us. Dion, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Why is this important, by the way?
Thank you, Tsepiso. And thanks for having me on your show. Bird control is exceptionally important if you think of the risks birds carry. They carry, in essence, 128 kind of diseases and can be very detrimental to human health.
And is it just their presence, or are we talking about their droppings? Why? Obviously, if you don't come into direct control, one would think that one is safe. So how do they spread about germs, disease, and why is this important? And please just tell us about the methods that you're using for this sort of pest control or bird abatement, as you call it.
To understand the public risk, your pest birds like your pigeon, your starlings, like I said, they carry 110 different kind of pathogens, but the problem becomes in their droppings, especially. Their droppings can harbor E. coli, salmonella, and it's potentially a serious lead to serious illnesses for humans. Their dried droppings also become airborne and can be inhaled, spreading respiratory infections. So even the bird nests, that's in food manufacturing areas sometimes, attract mites, ticks and fleas, and create secondary infections for humans, where these will bite humans and livestock. So when we say the health risk, that's what we're referring to. In terms of how we address this, what we've learned over the last couple of years, and it's been a 30-year learning curve for me, that there is no one solution. It's a integrated approach on how we have to deal with this problem. So we have to make the area for the bird, the environment very unpleasant, in a form of a better word.
So tell us about this American Harris hawks. What is this system?
So the American Harris hawk is one of the hawks we use to do flybys. So when birds acknowledge this hawk in the area, it becomes an unsafe environment for them, because the Harrison hawk does prey on other birds. It's one of the birds we use. We also use numerous falcons as well. So it's a natural predator to these pest birds, for a better word. But like I said, that's one of the scenarios we use. We also look at things like baiting systems, where, like a old scarecrow, the technology has evolved. So we now have what we call gel pods, which is like a fire frequency on a bird's eye. So they will perceive that area as being under fire and won't go into it. We use lasers. Laser technologies have also evolved. We use dogs, special trained dogs, to run around and make the area very unpleasant for those birds to be around. So as long as we can make the surroundings unpleasant, not welcoming for them, they kind of stay away from those areas.
What would you consider unethical technologies if you are trying to buy yourself pest control?
So, what I believe in as a responsible pest control company, poisons are not always the solution. There is a lot more natural methods we can use, like the birds. The use of poison, I think, is unethical. We have endangered birds. We cannot differentiate which bird will be taking these kind of poisons. So as a responsible pest control operators and pest management companies out there, we need to move away from these poison methods used to control birds.
Well, we really do thank you for your time and insights that you've shared with us. That there is Dion. Dion is from, as we mentioned, the company Dion van Staden is from Serviced Hygiene Solutions. He is the managing executive director, just speaking to us about pest control and what you can do and why it is important to do this. That's it from Africa World Hour. Thanks for joining us. Until the next time, good night.
Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive.